Listen. It'll save. Yeah, there you go. Bravo. You can come back in anytime you want to. I'm not just trying to get rid of you. Just makes the visual a little bit easier for the rest of us. Thanks so much. We are streaming live on YouTube. Good morning, live streamers. I got 9:30, so I'm going to get started. We don't seem to have too many sisters there. Is that because Sister Linda's gone, the cat's away, and the mice are playing? I'm going to turn my sound on here, Travis, and then share with you this song this morning. There is a version of this also in the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew, but this is the version mainly I take from the Gospel of Mark. This is this great story when James and John asked Jesus that they can sit at his right hand and his left, and at some point their mother gets involved in this one too, the first helicopter mom in the Gospels. And yeah, they want to sit with him in glory. And Jesus is kind of surprised and probably disappointed at what they've asked. And he says to them, well, are you ready to drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Are you willing to be baptized with the baptism I'm about to be baptized with? To make it very clear that this comes first, with this self-giving that Jesus is going to go through, not just in his death, but also his whole life in ministry. And I wrote this song, put it together in these days of Eucharistic revival to try to really get this point across, that Eucharist is always involved with service, always is involved with the church and us individuals giving ourselves away to. So here's the song. Again, I'll sing this refrain twice at the beginning, and you're most welcome to sing along if you'd like. By the way, Oregon Catholic Press just picked this song up. It's going to be in the new 2025 version of Breaking Bread. So a little plug for the new music. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life to the world. I'm going to try it. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life for the world. The bread that I will offer is my healing for the world, and the wine that I will offer is my very life outpoured. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life to the world. If I, your Lord and Master, have done such things for you, my friends and my disciples, so you must also do. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life for the world. Whatever act of kindness that you show the least of these, the hungry, poor and lonely, you have surely done for me. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life to the world. Okay, so our next step here today, I want to start out talking about perfection of all things. And this is a very dangerous trap for us religious, always looking to be angels, looking to be perfect. In Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount, which we're hearing quite a bit of this week, Jesus says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you," that eye for an eye there, as Jesus actually is quoting Exodus 21. It's also mentioned in Leviticus 24. That's called the law of retaliation. And that's sanctioned there in the Jewish scriptures. Now, to our ears, that might sound a little bit harsh. But if you think about it, even that's an advance over primitive societies. It's kind of an advance in the evolution of moral conscience, you might say. Before that particular way of thinking, there was only just reprisal and retribution and revenge and vengeance, even sanctioned in the Bible. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is at least proportional. It limits reprisal to reciprocity. Hence, an eye for an eye, no more. Tooth for tooth, no more, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Later on, Jewish thought, and remember I mentioned the other day, as I see it anyway, I read the Jewish scriptures, it's a whole library of books going from Genesis to the wisdom books. You can see this evolution in their own consciousness, not only in their ideas about God, but in their own moral conscience. So later Jewish thought, there's sometimes something is sometimes called the silver rule, as opposed to the golden rule. And the famous one for this was the great teacher Hillel, who died about 10 years into the Common Era, and really very much contemporary of Jesus. Some people even think that he might have had a great impact on Jesus' own thought, though I think he was from Babylon. Anyway, I forgot that now. But anyway, this would be the silver rule. That which is hateful to you, do not do unto your fellow. That's the whole Torah. The rest is just explanation. Go and learn. That's the whole Torah, sums it all up. And then, of course, comes what we call the golden rule, and not only us, but others call, and that's Jesus saying, this is in Matthew 7 too, in Sermon on the Mount too, do unto others as you would have them do to you. What's the subtle difference there? Well, this rule implies a positive action. It actually takes the initiative to create an atmosphere of goodwill. It's not just saying don't do something, it's saying do something. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So you see this evolution in the moral consciences here? Conscience. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth gives way to don't do anything to anybody else that you wouldn't want done to you. And then it comes to actually treat others as you would have yourself be treated. It's just positive. But then comes this piece of nonsense from Jesus. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Well, this is nothing less than moral heroism. This is like the height of sanctity. And this, I would say, I dare say, this is perfection. This, of course, is also a challenge to the language that we use nowadays when we talk about war. And of course, we've got two of them at least raging on our headlines every day. And this is actually one of the debates about nuclear weapons and so-called proportional response. I'm going to be drifting here a little bit more into our own worldview and how we approach what's going on around us. As many, even in the hierarchy of the church, have asked, in a nuclear age, can there actually be such a thing as a proportional response? And this, of course, is the debate about what's going on in the Gaza Strip right now. Even if we're just talking about proportional response, is the state of Israel's response to their attacks last October 7th been proportional? has been proportional. And of course, there's no clean answer to that. And that's the debate that's raging even at international level there. But at any rate, Jesus takes us even a step beyond the proportional response. And you can see how easy it is to make a case, as many people I knew from my youth did, for absolute pacifism. I say to you, the next step is no retribution at all. The next step is surrendering even your lawful rights for the sake of charity, for the sake of mercy, for the sake of relationship. For a while, I worked with a lot of people in the Santa Cruz, California area who were involved in a project called restorative justice. I don't know if you have that out here, if you heard about it. In restorative justice, the only proper response to a crime or to an injustice is to heal the relationship. The proper response is always reconciliation. This, hence the famous Truth Commission in South Africa after the apartheid era. The folks that work in this area, as far as I'm concerned, are a lot closer to the gospel injunctions than anything else. The proper response to an offense, to a crime, to an injustice is heal the relationship. The proper response is always reconciliation. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. So, what is Jesus, this great Jewish teacher, doing here? Remember, he said in an earlier sermon, do not think I've come to abolish the law. I've come to fulfill it. Jesus is bringing the law to fulfillment. A few sentences later, Jesus is going to use this word. That's where I'm heading for today. Perfect. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. This is one of those places that comes like a trap for some of us religious. Oh, I'm supposed to be perfect. What does that mean to be perfect? It's related to the Greek word, I put it in there, teleos. Be teleos. And in the Greek word telos means like the end, the ultimate goal. To be perfect is to have reached the consummated goal of life. So what you could say Jesus is doing is bringing the law to its telos, is bringing the law to its end, to its consummated goal, to its fulfillment. And what does it mean to be perfect? What's the fulfillment of the law? Well, we already heard from Hillel that's do nothing to others that you wouldn't have them do to you. There are several different variations of this in the scriptures, and somehow I think they all come together in Jesus from the Jewish scriptures. For example, in Deuteronomy, we hear, be tamin as I am tamin. God says, be blameless as I am blameless. In Leviticus, it's kedoshim, be kedoshim as I am kedoshim, which means like holy, holy and set apart, kedosh. As we noted, Matthew uses the word telos, be perfect as I am perfect. And to the Greek mind, to be perfect means to be conformed to the divine ideal, be just like God. For me, though, this is where the Gospel of Luke comes in handy and ties it right back in with this idea of loving your enemies. Luke's version of the story has Jesus say, be merciful as your heavenly Father is merciful. That's what perfection looks like in Jesus. It looks like mercy. One of the reasons this stuck so much in my mind was a little debate going on in one of our chapter meetings at the monastery. And one of our guys was a little bit on the scrupulous side. He's a 1 on the Enneagram, always in perfection. Said something about, but doesn't Jesus tell us to be perfect? And one of the elder monks looked across the way and said very softly, yes, but perfection to Jesus in the Gospel of Luke means be merciful. That's what perfection looks like. We're looking for perfection. We're looking for mercy. It's not some kind of abstract goal. I have this quote from our prior general, Benedetto Colati. Oh, I've misplaced it. I was going to read it to you yesterday. Anyway, I'll find it later, perhaps, and share it with you. It's not some kind of an abstract thing. It's really very clear. This is what it looks like. Perfection gives way to mercy. If it doesn't give way to mercy, it's not perfect like God's perfection. It's God's mercy, it's God's compassion that we're supposed to imitate. But that meaning of this mercy, this compassion, I go back and forth with words for it, as the translators do, is summed up with the Aramaic word that Jesus would have used, rachamin. You've heard this word before, probably. It actually means something like bowels. I'm not just trying to be prurient here. It's actually also what it means, like what a woman feels for this child she carries in her womb. It's that kind of depth of a feeling that mercy looks like. It's related to the Hebrew word rachum, not to mention the Arabic rahman and rahim, which describes that feeling from the bowels, this deep, visceral, emotional movement. We could even say when we say God is merciful, we use that word rachum. In the Jewish scriptures, it means like the womb of mercy. I actually used that in the lyric of a song once, and my publisher wouldn't use it. But that's really what it means, this great womb of mercy. And it is related to the Arabic. You know, every surah of the Quran begins with this phrase, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, praise Allah, the merciful and the compassionate. And my good Muslim friend at Oxford tells me that the one is feminine, the other is masculine. The mercy is feminine, and the compassion is masculine. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is what God is like. And there's another crazy word. I just love playing with these words. I hope you don't mind so much. It's used in the Gospels quite often. Again, I don't pronounce this very well. Splagchnizomai. I think that's the best way to pronounce it. It's a kind of a Hebrew word that got forced into the Greek, but again, it means this feeling that comes out of the bowels. It's like a gut-wrenching feeling. It's used literally hundreds of times to describe God's character, God's activity on behalf of the poor, on behalf of those who get pushed out and paralyzed and powerless. It's used over and over again in the Gospels to describe Jesus. For instance, when he heals the two blind men, Jesus is moved with this splagchnizomai, with this compassion. It gets translated usually. When he heals the leper in the Gospel of Mark, right there at the beginning, he's moved with splagchnizomai. It's translated pity. None of these English words have this kind of great visceral feeling to it. In Luke, when he raises the widow's son at 9, he had splagchnizomai, he had compassion on her. Again, exhibiting compassion for the downtrodden. Jesus is completely showing us who God is in the clearest, most concrete way possible. This is what God is like. It's almost, you could say that when we hear that Jesus had compassion on the crowd because they were like sheep without shepherd, when he sees the 4,000, when he cures the sick, it literally means like his body shook. His guts quaked when he saw these people who were sheep without a shepherd. And the other thing, Matthew quotes Jesus saying this line twice from the prophet Hosea. It's considered one of the signature themes of Jesus' message to his co-religionists. And again, if Matthew quotes it twice, him saying the same line, we better stand up and pay attention. This is when he scolds the Pharisees when he's been scolded by the Pharisees for eating with the tax collectors and the sinners. And then later on, when he gets again scolded by the Pharisees for plucking grain on the Sabbath, he quotes them Hosea 6:6. Go and learn the meaning of these words. It's love I desire, not sacrifice. That's what I want. It's love I desire, not sacrifice. And if you recall that other story, where the man comes to Jesus and asks him what the greatest commandment is. And Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself. Love your Lord God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And also the second is like it. Sorry, did I say that right? Love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the man says to him, you're right in saying that, Lord, Rabbi, that's more important than all burnt offerings and all sacrifices. And I always wonder why Jesus tells this man of all people, you're not far from the reign of God. You're not far from the kingdom of heaven, when all he's done is parrot back to Jesus. But he doesn't just parrot that back to Jesus. He adds this sentiment to it. That's more important than all the sacrifices. This is more important than anything else you do. This is it. And remember, this has really great roots, not just in the prophet Hosea, also in Isaiah, right at the beginning of the prophet Isaiah. And again, I see in this a kind of an evolution of the moral consciousness, even of the Jewish people, in this, we call this axial period, about 500 years before the common era, before the birth of Jesus, when it's starting to develop a sense of moral responsibility. It's not just about your feast days and slaughtering calves and burning offerings. I want you to do something. Right at the beginning of the prophet Isaiah, he says, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. That's what I'm looking for. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over one. Yeah. What is it to me, your multitude of sacrifices? Have enough of your burnt offerings. I'm tired of your new moons and your festivals. Seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. And there's that very strong, when we hear it's well into the maybe 2 or 3 weeks into Lent, we hear this one from Isaiah chapter 58. And I just love every time I get to it. You say, I'm not listening to you. You're not paying it, and that I'm not paying attention. This is God speaking. But this is the fast I really want. Loose the bonds of injustice, undo the thongs of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, break every yoke. That's the fast I'm looking for. I don't need all that other stuff. I need you to restore justice. I want you to heal relationships. Maybe we could retroactively translate the prophets, Isaiah and Hosea, to read something like, I don't want your sacrifices. I don't want your rituals. I don't want your liturgies. I want your bowels to shake with compassion. I want your whole body to vibrate with love and with mercy. If our rituals, our sacrifices, our costumes, our asceticism, our fasting, even our silence and our solitude, if they don't lead to that, then they're like the morning fog which burns off when the sun comes out. I just ran into something this morning. Bishop Barron just put it out, and I don't agree with necessarily everything he says or does, but this was really good. He says, the higher we go liturgically, the deeper we should go into service of the poor. And this is this moment of great Eucharistic revival, and I can't agree with that more. The higher we go liturgically, the deeper we have to go in service of the poor. This is what it means to be perfect, to be merciful. That's what it means to conform to the divine ideal. That's what it means to be like God, who reigns on the just and the unjust. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, at a micro level too, not just at a macro level. There's a line I read in a book somewhere that I used in a song one day. I've failed to treat my neighbor well, but I've loved humanity, maybe to a fault. We might think our telos, our ultimate goal, is union with God, or a stilled mind, or saying a mantra for half an hour without interruption, or my body dying and my soul going to heaven and looking as miserable as possible for the edification of our guests. But Jesus tells us our ultimate goal is to be merciful as God is merciful. That's the proof of our perfection. The fulfillment of the law is mercy. Jewish scriptures, they still allow praying for the defeat of our enemy. But with all due respect, I was at least raised in the school of thought that we Christians are not allowed to do that anymore. We're not. We have to imitate Jesus. I would also hasten to add that of all the rabbis I've met or worked with, I can't imagine one of them encouraging prayer for vengeance or violence against their foes. And that was a big debate when we began starting praying the Psalms in English, instead of Latin after the Second Vatican Council, whether or not we should use the so-called cursing Psalms, because at one point, we did every line of all 150 Psalms. Now, in the official liturgy of the church, I can't remember the exact numbers, but 2 Psalms are not used at all anywhere in the liturgy of the church. There was a school of thought in the ancient monastic tradition, and some of you might be familiar with this, that what we were really cursing was the demons, or the logismoi, the evil thoughts, and we're not really cursing our neighbor when these cursing psalms. At the same time, it was pretty hard to explain that to people when you were singing in a public liturgy, oh God, break the teeth in their mouths, let like grass, let them be trodden down and wither, let them be like the snail that dissolves into slime, like the untimely birth that never sees the sun. Yeah, God is love. Have a nice day. It's kind of hard to explain that to a congregation if you're singing something like that. One of my friends was a monk in another monastery, and one of the old guys said to him at one point, those cursing psalms are my favorite ones, As that's Psalm 58, by the way. Even if we sing it really nicely, in Gregorian chant, oh God, break the teeth in their mouths. The Lord is kind and merciful. No, many scripture scholars and liturgists said very clearly, these are not Christian prayers. We have to make real selective use of the things we say publicly. And the church does, though there are psalms and lines from psalms that never get used in our public worship. And that's kind of ideology put into action right there. Our monastic community opted not even to sing some of the lines from Psalm 136 that sings the praises of God whose love endures forever, but also struck down the firstborn of the Egyptians and struck down the great kings and killed famous kings. I used to think to myself, what if a non-Christian Egyptian suddenly popped into the church while we were singing that? How would you explain that? Oh, it's just metaphorical, as they go running out of church, and heading for their car. Jesus is pretty clear about a few things, and one of them is pray for your enemy. Again, at a micro as well as a macro level. Love your enemy, do not curse them. I'm having a hard time with this one during this political season. I must admit, I'm a total hypocrite when it comes to this, but still, I know where the signpost is. This is another place where Jesus is bringing the Jewish law to its fulfillment. And I like to think this is even an evolution of moral conscience. Imagine Jesus teaching this to his contemporary co-religionists, his fellow Jews, who were no doubt familiar with calling down scriptural curses on their enemies, on their Roman occupiers, even on their neighbor who had stolen their property. This is not an easy or popular message. This is a very courageous one, very courageous one. I have a good friend, Father John Deere, who used to be a former Jesuit who worked with Father Daniel Berrigan a lot late in Dan's life. And he's out there right now still preaching the gospel of nonviolence. This is not a popular message right now. People do not want to hear it. Not in the ear of MAGA Republicans, certainly. Love your enemy. Be like God. Be perfect. Be merciful. To be perfect like God is be merciful like God. It's to call down no vengeance on anybody. Mercy is perfection. Be like God. Be perfect. No exceptions. There's no room in the gospel for vengeance. There's no place in the gospel for reprisal. There's no place in the gospel for retaliation. There's only mercy, only restoration, only reconciliation. There was a wonderful line from the great scripture scholar Jürgen Moltmann. Said Jesus first died for the victims and then died for the executioners. And in doing so, Jesus revealed a new justice that breaks this infernal cycle of hatred and vengeance, which I continue to perpetuate in my own life, unfortunately, at a very micro level. Jesus breaks that infernal hatred, circle of hatred and vengeance, and creates from both the victims and the executioners a new human race endowed with a new humanity. This is where our consciousness is supposed to be evolving. That's what we're called to do, and that's what we're called to be in this violent world. We followers of Jesus, we're the ones who are supposed to break that infernal circle of hatred and vengeance at a micro level as well as a macro level. That applies to our petty little squabbles over food in the cafeteria, as well as our grand global gestures. How are we going to fight for world peace if I can't get along with the person I eat next to? We're the ones who are the first in this new human race endowed with the new humanity. And this too is a part of our kenosis. The book of says that the chosen people have to observe these statutes and decrees with all their hearts and all their souls. And we, in our own way, are a people peculiarly God's own. Deuteronomy is applying this to the strictures and codes of the law, but when we Christians hear this, we hear this admonition on the lips of Jesus concerning his own teaching. You must observe these statutes and decrees with all your laws and all your soul. Be perfect, be merciful, no exceptions. I think St. Benedict thought this was a pretty important teaching for monastics too. If you recall, this is chapter 4 of the rule. Live by God's commandments every day. Harbor neither hatred nor jealousy of anyone. Do nothing out of envy. This is not just the United Nations we're talking about. This is community life we're talking about. Do not love quarreling, shun arrogance, respect the elders, love the young, pray for your enemies out of love for Christ. If you have a dispute with someone, make peace with them before the sun goes down. And finally, never, 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 never lose hope in God's mercy. Okay, sing again, and then we'll end for this morning's session. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life to the world. As grain that once was scattered on the hills is now made one, may the Holy Church bear witness to the reign of God now come. Are you ready to drink the cup that I drink? Are you willing to be baptized in my death? Drink this cup, be baptized, give your life for the world. Okay, thank you, sisters and brothers and streaming audience. See you this afternoon at 3:30.